The planet Krylos was dying. Its skies, once a brilliant shade of blue, were now choked with thick black smoke. Alien warships hovered above, their metallic surfaces glinting menacingly in the dim light. Explosions echoed across the land, shaking the ground and sending tremors through the hearts of those still alive. The invaders, known as the Vorthak, had come without warning, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. In just weeks, they had crushed entire armies and reduced cities to rubble. Jake Carter crouched behind a crumbling wall, his rifle gripped tightly in his hands. Sweat dripped down his face as he tried to steady his breathing. He glanced around at the others, what was left of them. There were only a handful now, huddled together in the shadow of what used to be Fort Krylos. Most of them were wounded, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Jake felt the weight of despair pressing down on him. It was hard to believe that just months ago, he had been excited to join the military, eager to prove himself. Now, all he wanted was to survive another day. Nearby, Emily Hayes knelt beside a soldier who lay on the ground, clutching his side. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining the dirt beneath him. Emily's hands moved quickly, applying pressure to the wound while whispering words of encouragement. "Hold on," she said softly, though her voice trembled. "You're going to make it." But deep down, she wasn't sure if he, or any of them, would last much longer. Supplies were running low, and morale was even lower. Every time they thought they had a chance, the Vorthak struck back harder, faster, and more mercilessly than before. Above them, the alien ships continued their relentless assault. Bright beams of energy tore through the air, striking buildings and turning them into fireballs. The roar of engines filled the sky as drones patrolled the area, searching for survivors. Jake clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay focused. He knew they couldn't afford to lose hope, no matter how bleak things seemed. Still, it was getting harder to ignore the sinking feeling in his chest. Defeat felt certain. Emily finished bandaging the injured soldier and looked up at Jake. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but there was still a flicker of determination in them. "We have to keep moving," she said firmly. "If we stay here, they'll find us." Jake nodded, though he didn't know where they could go. Everywhere they turned, there was destruction. Every path led to more danger. But he understood what Emily meant. They couldn't give up. "Not yet. Let's gather everyone," he replied. "We'll head toward the old bunker. Maybe we can hold out there for a little longer." As they began organizing the group, Commander Alan Drake approached. His uniform was torn, and his face was streaked with soot, but his presence commanded respect. "Listen up," he said, raising his voice over the chaos. "I sent a distress signal. Help might be coming. Until then, we fight. We don't surrender." His words brought a small spark of hope to the weary soldiers. They nodded, some muttering agreement, others too tired to respond. But the message was clear. They weren't done yet. Even if defeat seemed inevitable, they would stand their ground. Because that's what humans did. They fought, no matter the odds. Jake tightened his grip on his rifle and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he would face it head-on. Commander Alan Drake stood in the dimly lit control room, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the transmitter. The device crackled with static, its faint hum the only sound in the otherwise silent room. Outside, the distant rumble of explosions reminded him that time was running out. He had already sent the distress signal 3 times, but there was no response. No sign that anyone had heard their plea for help. Still, he refused to give up. "This is Commander Alan Drake of Fort Krylos," he said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We are under heavy attack by an advanced alien force. Our defenses have collapsed, and we are unable to hold out much longer. If anyone can hear this, please respond. Humanity needs you." Emily Hayes entered the room just as Drake finished his message. She carried a small medical kit, her face pale but resolute. "Any luck?" she asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. Drake shook his head. Nothing yet. But I'm not giving up. Someone has to hear us. Emily nodded, setting the kit down on a nearby table. She glanced at the blinking lights on the transmitter, then back at Drake. They'll come, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. They have to. Meanwhile, Jake Carter stood guard near the entrance of the bunker, his rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of movement. The Vorthak were everywhere, patrolling the skies, sweeping through the ruins, hunting down survivors. Every shadow made his heart race. Every sound sent a jolt of adrenaline through his body. He hated feeling so powerless, so outnumbered. But he couldn't let his guard down, not even for a moment. Inside the bunker, the remaining soldiers tried to rest, though sleep was nearly impossible. Some sat slumped against the walls, their faces blank with exhaustion. Others whispered quietly, sharing stories of home or praying silently for salvation. A young private named Sarah leaned against Emily, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to die here," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You're not going to die," Emily replied firmly, wrapping an arm around her. "We're getting out of this. Together." As the hours dragged on, hope began to fade. The Vorthak's attacks grew more frequent, their drones buzzing overhead like angry insects. Jake could feel the pressure mounting. They were running out of time. Just as he thought things couldn't get worse, a sudden burst of static erupted from the control room. Drake's voice rang out, loud and urgent. "Everyone, gather in the main chamber. We've got something." The soldiers scrambled to their feet, their weariness momentarily forgotten. They rushed into the control room, where Drake stood hunched over the transmitter. On the screen, a faint signal flickered. A response. "Repeat your message." A voice crackled through the static. It was distorted, but unmistakably human. Drake didn't hesitate. "This is Commander Alan Drake of Fort Krylos. We are under attack by an alien force and require immediate assistance. Do you copy?" There was a long pause, during which no one dared to breathe. Then the voice returned, clearer this time. "This is Captain Laura Bennett of the Patrol Fleet Epsilon 7. We've received your distress call and are en route to your location. Hold your position if possible. Estimated arrival: 8 hours." A wave of relief washed over the room. For the first time in weeks, the soldiers allowed themselves to believe that help was coming. Emily clasped her hands together, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. Jake exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging with relief. Even Drake, who had kept his composure throughout the ordeal, allowed himself a small smile. But the celebration was short-lived. The Vorthak weren't going to wait 8 hours. Their ships descended lower, their weapons firing relentlessly. Jake tightened his grip on his rifle, knowing they still had a long fight ahead. Help was coming, but until then, they would have to survive on their own. "We can do this," Emily said, her voice steady. "We just have to hold on a little longer." And with those words, the soldiers prepared for one last stand. Captain Laura Bennett sat in the command chair of her flagship, staring at the holographic map displayed before her. The message from Fort Krylos replayed in her mind, each word heavy with desperation. She knew the risks of diverting her fleet to a planet under siege by the Vorthak. Her mission had been routine, patrolling the outer rim of human-controlled space. But now, everything had changed. Lives depended on her decision. "Ma'am," said Maria Lopez, her trusted pilot, breaking the silence. "If we go to Krylos, we'll be outnumbered. The Vorthak have an entire armada there." Laura nodded, her jaw tightening. "I know. But if we don't act, those people are as good as dead." Maria hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Understood. What's the plan?" Laura turned to Daniel Brooks, her best sniper, who stood nearby, his arms crossed. "Daniel, you'll lead the ground assault once we establish a foothold. We need to hit them hard and fast. Maria, you'll handle the air support. Keep their fighters off our backs while we deploy." "And what about you?" Daniel asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'll coordinate from the flagship," Laura replied firmly. "We can't afford any mistakes." The fleet moved quickly, entering Krylos's atmosphere within hours. As they approached, the scale of the devastation became clear. The surface was scarred with craters, and smoke billowed into the sky. Alien warships loomed overhead, their weapons trained on the remnants of human resistance below. Laura's heart sank at the sight, but she pushed her emotions aside. There was no time for doubt. Maria's voice crackled over the comms. "Vorthak ships incoming. They'd spotted us." "Engage," Laura ordered. "Protect the dropships at all costs." Maria's squadron surged forward, their sleek fighters weaving through the enemy forces with precision. Lasers flashed across the sky as explosions lit up the horizon. Maria's hands moved deftly over the controls, her focus absolute. She dodged enemy fire, retaliating with deadly accuracy. One by one, Vorthak drones fell from the sky, clearing a path for the human dropships. On the ground, Jake Carter watched the battle unfold above him. At first, he thought it was another wave of Vorthak reinforcements, but then he saw the insignia on the ships, a human fleet. Relief flooded through him, though it was quickly tempered by caution. The fight wasn't over yet. "They're here," Jake shouted, waving his arms to get the attention of the others. Helps arrived. Emily Hayes rushed to his side, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you sure?" Jake pointed to the sky. "Look for yourself." As the dropships descended, Daniel Brooks led the charge, his rifle already blazing. He moved with precision, taking down Vorthak soldiers with every shot. Behind him, a team of Marines secured the perimeter, their movements coordinated and efficient. Emily and Jake joined the effort, guiding the wounded to safety while keeping an eye out for enemy threats. Laura monitored the operation from her flagship, issuing orders to keep the assault organized. "Maria, I need you to take out that artillery emplacement. It's tearing through our defenses." "On it," Maria replied, banking her fighter sharply and accelerating toward the target. With a well-placed missile, she destroyed the emplacement, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. Despite the chaos, Laura felt a flicker of hope. Her crew was holding their own, and the survivors on the ground were rallying behind them. For the first time in weeks, humanity was fighting back and winning. But the Vorthak weren't done yet. Reinforcements poured in, their numbers overwhelming. Laura clenched her fists, her mind racing. They needed a way to turn the tide completely, or this victory would be short-lived. The battle raged on, the air thick with smoke and the sound of explosions. Maria Lopez's fighter jet zipped through the sky, dodging enemy fire while launching precise attacks against the Vorthak ships. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctive, as she weaved between larger vessels and smaller drones. Each shot she fired found its mark, sending alien debris raining down onto the battlefield below. Though outnumbered, Maria refused to back down. She knew her role was crucial, keeping the skies clear so the ground forces could advance. On the ground, Daniel Brooks moved like a shadow, his sniper rifle steady in his hands. He crouched behind a pile of rubble, scanning the area for targets. The Vorthak soldiers were heavily armored, their weapons far superior to anything the humans had faced before. But Daniel had an eye for detail, and he quickly noticed something important: small gaps in their armor near the joints. Aiming carefully, he fired a round that struck one of the aliens in the knee joint. The creature stumbled, giving the nearby Marines an opening to take it down. Jake Carter fought alongside the Marines, his rifle kicking back with each shot. He wasn't used to combat on this scale, but adrenaline kept him moving. Beside him, Emily Hayes stayed focused on keeping the wounded alive. She carried a makeshift stretcher, dragging injured soldiers to safety whenever there was a brief lull in the fighting. Her hands trembled as she worked, but her determination never wavered. "Stay with me," she whispered to a young soldier bleeding heavily from his side. "Help is coming." Despite their efforts, the Vorthak continued to push forward. Their numbers seemed endless, and their weapons tore through human defenses with ease. Laura Bennett watched the situation unfold from her flagship, her expression grim. They needed a breakthrough, and fast. She turned to her communications officer. "Patch me through to Daniel and Maria. We need a new strategy." Moments later, Daniel's voice came over the comms. "What do you need, Captain?" "We're taking too many hits on the ground," Laura said. "Maria, focus your strikes on their supply lines. If we can cut off their reinforcements, we might have a chance." "Copy that," Maria replied. She adjusted her flight path, targeting a convoy of Vorthak vehicles carrying ammunition and troops. With surgical precision, she unleashed a barrage of missiles, destroying the convoy in a fiery explosion. The loss of supplies forced the Vorthak to slow their advance, giving the humans a much-needed reprieve. Meanwhile, Jake spotted an opportunity. While helping Emily carry a wounded Marine to safety, he noticed a group of Vorthak soldiers clustered around a large piece of machinery. It looked like some kind of shield generator, protecting a section of their forces. If they could disable it, the humans would gain a significant advantage. "I've got an idea," Jake said to Emily, pointing toward the generator. "Cover me." Emily hesitated, fear flashing across her face. "Be careful." Jake nodded and sprinted toward the generator, using the chaos of the battlefield to stay hidden. When he reached it, he planted a small explosive charge, setting the timer for 30 seconds. As he ran back to safety, the device detonated, sending a shockwave through the area. The shield flickered and collapsed, leaving the Vorthak exposed. Daniel saw the opening and acted immediately. "All units, concentrate fire on the unshielded zone," he shouted into his comm. The Marines followed his lead, pouring bullets into the vulnerable enemy forces. One by one, the Vorthak fell, their once impenetrable line beginning to crumble. Laura watched the tide turn from her flagship, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. Her crew had done the impossible. They had fought back against overwhelming odds. But she knew the fight wasn't over yet. The Vorthak still held key positions, and their main command center remained intact. Destroying it would be the only way to secure victory. "Keep pushing," Laura ordered. "We're close. Don't let up now." The soldiers on the ground responded with renewed energy, their spirits lifted by the progress they'd made. For the first time since the invasion began, hope burned brightly in their hearts. They had proven that even in the face of certain defeat, humanity could rise up and fight. And they weren't done yet. The battlefield was quieter now, but the tension hung heavy in the air. The humans had managed to push back the Vorthak, at least for a moment. But everyone knew the fight was far from over. Jake Carter leaned against a broken wall, catching his breath. His hands were trembling, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of what they had accomplished. And what still lay ahead. Emily Hayes sat nearby, tending to a wounded soldier. Her movements were slow and deliberate, her face pale but resolute. "We can't stop now," Jake said, breaking the silence. "If we do, they'll regroup and hit us harder." Emily nodded without looking up. "I know. But how do we finish this? They're still too strong." Jake glanced at the distant Vorthak command center, its towering structure looming over the landscape. It was heavily guarded, with layers of defenses protecting it. Destroying it wouldn't be easy, but it was their only chance. He turned to Daniel Brooks, who was reloading his sniper rifle nearby. "What do you think? Can we take out their command center?" Daniel frowned, studying the structure through his scope. "It's risky. Their defenses are insane. But if we can get inside and disable it from there, we might stand a chance." Laura Bennett's voice crackled over the comms. "Report. What's the status on the ground?" Jake grabbed the communicator. "Captain, we've got an idea. Their command center is the heart of their operation. If we can take it out, we can cripple them. But we'll need support." There was a pause before Laura responded. "Understood. Maria, provide cover fire while the ground team moves in. Jake, Daniel, you lead the assault. Be careful. This is our last shot." Maria Lopez's fighter jet roared overhead, strafing enemy positions to clear a path for the team. The sound of explosions echoed as she targeted Vorthak soldiers guarding the perimeter of the command center. "Path is clear," she shouted into the comms. "Move fast." Jake, Daniel, and a small group of Marines sprinted toward the command center, using the chaos caused by Maria's attack to stay hidden. Emily stayed behind, helping the wounded and keeping watch for any incoming threats. She clenched her fists, wishing she could join them, but she knew her place was here, keeping people alive. As they approached the command center, Daniel spotted a weak point in the outer defenses, a maintenance hatch partially hidden by debris. "This way," he whispered, motioning for the others to follow. They moved quickly, avoiding patrols and slipping inside. The interior was a maze of corridors and control rooms, filled with Vorthak soldiers and humming machinery. Jake and Daniel led the way, their weapons ready. Every step felt like walking into a trap, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. They reached a large chamber where the central core of the command center was located. It pulsed with energy, powering the entire Vorthak operation. "This is it," Jake said, his voice low. "We destroy this, and we win." Daniel scanned the room, spotting a group of Vorthak engineers working at consoles. "We'll need a distraction. I'll draw their fire. You plant the explosives." Jake hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Just do your job," Daniel replied, already moving into position. He fired a shot, drawing the attention of the Vorthak. The aliens turned toward him, giving Jake the opening he needed. Jake rushed to the core, setting explosive charges around its base. His hands shook as he worked, the timer ticking down in his mind. He glanced back at Daniel, who was exchanging fire with the Vorthak. "Almost done," he shouted. "Hurry," Daniel yelled back, his voice strained. A Vorthak blast narrowly missed him, sending sparks flying. Finally, Jake finished setting the charges. "Let's go," he called, running toward Daniel. The two men retreated down the corridor as the countdown reached its final seconds. Behind them, the core erupted in a massive explosion, shaking the entire structure. Back outside, Maria saw the flames shoot into the sky. "They did it," she muttered, relief washing over her. They actually did it. The Vorthak forces began to retreat, their coordination shattered without the command center. Laura watched from her flagship, her heart swelling with pride. The humans had fought against impossible odds, and won. But as the dust settled, she knew the cost had been high. Too many lives had been lost, and the scars of this battle would linger for years. Still, amidst the devastation, there was hope. The relentless spirit of humanity had prevailed once again. The explosion at the Vorthak command center sent a shockwave through the battlefield. Flames and smoke billowed into the sky, and the once imposing structure collapsed in on itself. The Vorthak forces, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Their ships pulled back from the fight, some fleeing into space while others hovered aimlessly, their systems confused without the central hub to guide them. On the ground, the humans watched in stunned silence as their enemies withdrew. Maria Lopez circled above in her fighter jet, ensuring the Vorthak weren't regrouping for another attack. Her fuel was running low, but she refused to leave her post until she was certain the threat was gone. "They're pulling out," she reported over the comms. "Looks like we did it." Laura Bennett let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She leaned back in her command chair, exhaustion washing over her. For weeks, she had doubted whether they could win this fight. But now, staring at the crumbling remnants of the Vorthak forces, she felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had survived, against all odds. On the ground, Jake Carter and Daniel Brooks emerged from the wreckage of the command center, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. They were limping, bruised, and battered, but alive. The Marines who had accompanied them cheered, their voices hoarse but filled with relief. Jake looked around at the survivors, his heart heavy with both pride and sorrow. So many had fallen to get them this far. Emily Hayes ran toward them, her medical kit bouncing against her side. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling as she examined their injuries. "We're fine," Jake replied, though he winced as Emily touched a deep cut on his arm. "It's over. We stopped them." Daniel nodded, leaning against a piece of rubble. "For now, anyway. But we can't let our guard down. They might come back." Emily swallowed hard, glancing at the horizon where the last of the Vortex ships disappeared. "What do we do now?" Laura's voice came over the comms, addressing everyone. "Regroup and secure the area. Tend to the wounded and assess the damage. We've won this battle, but we need to prepare for whatever comes next." As the soldiers began cleaning up, Jake walked over to Daniel. "You saved us back there," he said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Daniel shrugged, trying to hide the pain in his shoulder. "We all played our part. That's what kept us alive." Jake nodded, but guilt gnawed at him. He thought about all the people who hadn't made it, the ones who had sacrificed everything so they could succeed. It wasn't fair that some lived while others didn't. He clenched his fists, vowing not to forget their sacrifice. Meanwhile, Laura gathered her crew aboard the flagship. She stood before them, her expression somber despite the victory. "Today we proved something important," she said. "Humanity isn't just strong because of our weapons or technology. We're strong because we refuse to give up, no matter how bad things get. But this fight isn't over. The Vorthak will learn from this defeat, and so should we. We need to be ready for the next time." Her words resonated with the crew, who nodded in agreement. Maria stepped forward. "What's the plan, Captain?" "We stay here for now," Laura replied. "Help the survivors rebuild. Then we'll head back to Earth and report what happened. The rest of humanity needs to know what we're up against and how much we're capable of." Back on the surface, Emily worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. Supplies were scarce, but she made do with what she had, improvising bandages and splints. Soldiers thanked her as she passed, their gratitude evident in their weary smiles. Despite the horrors they had endured, there was a sense of unity among them, a bond forged in the fires of battle. As night fell over Krylos, the survivors gathered around makeshift fires, sharing stories of those they had lost and celebrating the lives they had saved. Jake sat quietly, staring into the flames. Emily joined him after finishing her rounds, sitting close enough to share his warmth. "We made it," she said softly. Jake nodded, but his eyes remained on the fire. "Yeah, but I can't stop thinking about everyone who didn't." Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "They wouldn't want us to dwell on that. They'd want us to keep going, to make sure their sacrifice meant something." Jake looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. She was right. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken the first step toward reclaiming their future. Together, they would rebuild and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. Weeks passed, and the planet Krylos slowly began to heal. The scars of the battle were still visible: burnt-out buildings, shattered streets, and fields littered with debris. But life was returning. Survivors worked tirelessly to rebuild what they could, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had won. The Vorthak were gone, at least for now, and humanity had proven it could stand against even the most advanced foes. Jake Carter stood on a hill overlooking the ruins of Fort Krylos, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The wind tugged at his jacket as he stared at the horizon. It was strange to think that just weeks ago, this place had been a war zone. Now, it was quiet, too quiet. He missed the noise, the chaos, the sense of purpose that came with fighting for survival. Without it, he felt lost. Emily Hayes approached him, carrying a tray of food. "You haven't eaten all day," she said, holding it out to him. "You need to take care of yourself." Jake hesitated before taking the tray. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his stomach growled in protest. He glanced at Emily, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. She had been working nonstop since the battle ended, treating the wounded and helping with the rebuilding efforts. "You should rest too," he added. "You look exhausted." Emily smiled faintly. So do you, but we got a lot to do. We can't stop now. Jake nodded, turning his gaze back to the ruins. Do you think we'll ever really be safe? I mean, the Vorthak might come back. They might, Emily admitted. But if they do, we'll be ready. We've learned from this. Next time, we'll be stronger. Her words gave Jake a small measure of comfort, but the weight of uncertainty still lingered. He knew the fight wasn't over, not truly. The Vorthak were just one threat among many, and humanity's enemies were growing bolder. Still, he couldn't deny the progress they had made. The survivors of Krylos had shown incredible resilience, coming together to rebuild their home brick by brick. Nearby, Laura Bennett oversaw the construction of new defenses. Her fleet had stayed behind to assist, providing both manpower and resources. She walked among the workers, offering encouragement and guidance. Though her mission had been completed, she felt responsible for these people. They had trusted her, followed her lead, and she owed them everything she could give. Maria Lopes sat on the edge of a half-finished wall, her legs dangling as she watched the activity below. Her fighter jet was grounded for repairs, but she didn't mind. For once, there was no immediate danger, no enemy ships to chase. She leaned back, closing her eyes and letting the sun warm her face. It felt good to breathe easy, even if only for a moment. Daniel Brooks stood nearby, examining a map of the area. His sniper rifle rested against his shoulder, its barrel scratched and worn from constant use. He traced the lines on the map with his finger, plotting potential defensive positions. "We need more watchtowers," he said to Laura as she approached. "If they come back, we'll need early warning." Laura nodded. "Agreed. Start marking the locations. We'll get the materials tomorrow." As night fell, the survivors gathered around a large fire, sharing stories and laughter. It was a rare moment of peace, a chance to forget the hardships they had endured. Jake and Emily sat together, listening as others recounted tales of bravery and sacrifice. Some spoke of fallen comrades, their voices thick with emotion. Others joked about close calls, their laughter cutting through the heaviness of the past. Laura joined them briefly, sitting on a log beside Maria. "You did good here," Maria said quietly. "You saved these people." "I didn't do it alone," Laura replied. "None of us could have done this without each other." Maria smiled, leaning back on her hands. "Still, you're the reason we came. You took a risk, and it paid off." Laura looked around at the faces illuminated by the firelight. These people had faced unimaginable odds and come out stronger. They had lost so much, but they had also gained something invaluable. Hope. It wasn't a guarantee of safety or victory, but it was enough to keep them moving forward. As the fire crackled and sparks floated into the sky, Jake felt a flicker of optimism. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they had already proven they could overcome the impossible. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would survive. And if the Vorthak, or anyone else, ever returned, they would be ready. Months had passed since the battle on Krylos, and the planet was beginning to resemble its former self. New buildings rose from the ashes of the old ones, their walls painted in bright colors that stood out against the gray scars of war. The survivors worked together, planting crops, repairing roads, and setting up schools for the children who had endured so much. Life was far from perfect, but it was moving forward. Jake Carter walked through the streets of the rebuilt settlement, watching as people went about their routines. Children laughed as they played in the square, their voices filling the air with a sense of normalcy he hadn't thought possible. He stopped by a small cafe where Emily Hayes worked part-time, serving food and drinks to those who came by. She smiled when she saw him, waving him over. "You're late," she teased, handing him a cup of coffee. "I thought you'd forgotten about our morning chat." "Never," Jake replied, taking the cup. "Just got caught up helping Daniel with the watchtowers." Emily nodded, glancing toward the edge of the settlement where new towers stood tall, guarding against any future threats. "He's been working hard. We all have." Jake took a sip of his coffee, looking around at the bustling community. It's strange, isn't it? A few months ago, this place was nothing but ruins. Now, look at it. Emily followed his gaze, her expression softening. People are resilient. They've always found a way to rebuild, no matter how bad things get. That's what makes us strong. Laura Bennett stood nearby, observing the scene with quiet pride. Her fleet had departed weeks earlier, leaving behind supplies and personnel to help with the reconstruction. Though she had returned to her duties elsewhere, she made regular visits to check on the progress. Seeing the settlement thrive gave her hope, not just for Krylos, but for humanity as a whole. Maria Lopes leaned against a lamppost, watching a group of kids race toy planes across the dirt. She grinned, shaking her head. They're probably dreaming of being fighter pilots one day. Maybe, Laura said, joining her. If they do, I hope they're as good as you. Maria chuckled. Let's hope they don't have to fight wars like we did. The two women shared a moment of silence, reflecting on everything they had been through. The battle on Krylos had changed them, shaping them into leaders who understood the value of unity and sacrifice. They knew the galaxy still held dangers, but they also knew humanity could face them, together. Daniel Brooks sat atop one of the watchtowers, his rifle resting beside him. He scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of trouble. So far, there was nothing, just empty plains stretching toward the distant mountains. He felt a pang of unease, knowing the Vorthak or others like them might return someday. But for now, the peace held, and that was enough. Back in the square, Jake and Emily joined the crowd gathering for a ceremony. Commander Alan Drake stood at the center, his voice steady as he addressed the people. Today, we honor those who gave their lives to protect this planet. Their courage will never be forgotten. The crowd fell silent, heads bowed in respect. Flowers were placed at a memorial wall etched with the names of the fallen. Tears flowed freely, but so did laughter as stories of bravery and friendship were shared. As the ceremony ended, Jake turned to Emily. Do you think we'll ever see another battle like that? I don't know, she admitted. But if we do, we'll be ready. We've learned how to stand together, no matter what comes our way. Jake smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The scars of the past would always remain, but they were reminders of what humanity could overcome. Together, they had faced defeat and emerged victorious. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them the same way, with courage, determination, and an unshakable belief in the strength of the human spirit. Krylos was alive again, proof that even in the darkest times, light could break through. It wasn't just a planet. It was a symbol of hope, and as long as people refused to give up, that hope would endure.